Nothing on screen. Good afternoon. It's just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News, Thursday, the 14th of May 2015. I'm Brian Gerrish, your host this afternoon. With me behind the technical desk, Nick Green. And we'll just say we had a few snags earlier on this morning when the power suddenly disappeared, it would appear, for our section of Plymouth. Is that something to come? Well, the good news is that despite some rain overnight, it's not too bad in Plymouth. I'm told it's sunny in Scotland, although London is looking pretty wet and windy. So lots of water in London. It happens that way. Well, global warming is the cause, and that brings us nicely on to the intelligence of Britain's mainstream media, because I'd like to remind our viewers and listeners of the importance of beavers. And we'll take you back to 2014 initially, where the Daily Telegraph, of course, one of Britain's most educated papers, said that squirrels and beavers in the tundra were to blame for global warming. Apparently, the little creatures were scrambling around, breaking up the surface of the earth, and this was releasing methane gas. And that's what's been causing the global warming, and that's what's causing the rain in London, we believe, today. And at the same time, it's warmed Scotland. Well, the Telegraph got a bit squeamish, and a few months later, they decided they really needed to educate the public. So they decided to tell the public everything they needed to know about Storm Rachel. And interestingly enough, they replaced the beaver with a proper meteorological map where they could explain all the detail. So the beaver was back in December 2014, and we then switched to the high-tech map on January 2015. Well, UK Column is going to tell people today that those beavers were pretty angry at the bad publicity they received. And consequently, the Daily Mail has come up with this story that a woman has been savaged by an angry beaver, but luckily a neighbour managed to stab the animal to death after seeing it tearing at his friend's leg in Russia. So this is high-profile, informative international news from the Daily Mail, and they have even shown a picture of the deceased badger, and we can only believe that this could be the end of global warming. Now that at least one of the poor creatures has departed the planet. Well, is this serious stuff? We think it is, because of course what the mainstream press are also doing is playing around with reality by pumping out these sorts of stories. So the Mail here jumping on the ISIS twin bandwagon, and they're also running the story that a pair of girls who ran away with the extremists have now apparently escaped the clutches of these very dangerous people. They could be executed if they're caught because they've abandoned the ISIS camp. But of course, they've now got a problem because we don't know whether they're going to be able to get back into UK. Now, remember, of course, we've seen the papers favour pictures of females like this before, and we had Samantha, the red knicker terrorist, who was blasted all over Britain's mainstream press until she quietly faded away. Is this real? We don't believe so. So we just remind ourselves again what's been going on over the last few days, and I've no apologies for recapping on this. We've got the Daily Mail telling us that MI5 has been recruiting officers to get in amongst would-be terrorists and to persuade them not to be naughty and go overseas. We've got the Express jumping into booklets talking about how we are to be murdered in our beds. Unfortunately, the Express was using memory as a source, which appears to be intimately connected both with the CIA, American intelligence services, and indeed Israel. And then we saw the emergence of this extraordinary story, which says that basically all of the gays from the Muslim community in Britain have been running off to fight with ISIS because they're getting such a terrible time at home in Britain. Well, let's highlight that with a big red ring. We said this is complete nonsense. What is the agenda? Well, this was the agenda that David Cameron and his Tory party are lining up for a fresh clampdown on liberties in UK on the back of this created nonsense on terrorism. So let's look at it. The Muslim homosexuals are running overseas to join ISIS. Well, that's not such a wise decision because, we've got the Daily Mail here showing a picture of an unfortunate person, it would appear, has been thrown off a building. So we've got people in the Muslim community apparently so silly that they're going to join these people overseas who are then going to massacre them. Well, what is the truth? I think the minimum we can say is that at the moment it doesn't appear that any of Britain's mainstream papers are doing any proper investigative journalism into what is causing terrorism overseas, what are the root causes, and in fact what the truth is at the moment about the role of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra and others in the Middle East. So we'll wait to see how this pans out, but at the moment UK Column is saying utter rubbish being produced by Britain's mainstream media. Well, the serious stuff, of course, never appears in our national press. We took one of these stories off the internet this morning. Thank you for the person who highlighted it, where a mother of three apparently faces prison. She's had her son taken away from her. Of course, she's desperate. She's speaking out on the internet. She's been criticising social workers. And as a result, a judge has said, if you continue to do this, I will put you in prison. So while Britain is standing there criticising the rest of the world, what are we doing? We're taking people's children away for profit and to feed the sexual abuse industry. And of course, if the parents dare complain, then David Cameron's system puts them in prison. And that leads us nicely into the Hampstead story. Remember, a boy and a girl went public in a video. The video was made public at least, of two young children talking about horrific abuse. This was never fully investigated by the police. Key witnesses never brought in for investigation. And then in a closed secret family court, a single judge says the whole thing is utter nonsense. Well, of course, the testimony of the children still exists. And the police, as we say, failed to carry out any full and proper investigation, just as with the Holly Gregg case. We would like to say publicly today that we continue to remember and support the abused Hampstead children, and indeed their mother and her partner. And we continue to remember that no proper police investigation ever took place. Well, we're also going to remember this lady, Nilu, because she was one of the very brave members of the public that decided they weren't going to let this case just sit. She demonstrated peacefully outside the church in Hampstead, which has been named as being implicated in the abuse ring. And as a result of her actions, she was arrested outside of the Ecuadorian London embassy. I'm sorry, there's an old picture, so we're talking several weeks ago, not 3 days ago. But what were the charges? Well, it was relating to Hampstead. So the police were prepared to turn up at another demonstration to actually arrest this lady, and that case is still ongoing. So if you speak out about child abuse in Britain, you can expect to be hounded by the police and, for many people, imprisoned. This is one lady, of course, still in Peterborough prison. Melanie Shaw. What is a crime to be a child abuse victim and then to have the bravery to speak out not only about her abuse, but of 150 other children associated with Nottingham Children's Home. Beechwood Children's Home in Nottingham. And the government, through the Crown Prosecution Service, Alison Saunders, the lady at the moment who would appear to be defending Lord Janner, of course, Alison Saunders' team put Melanie in prison. Let's bring in this gentleman as well, because here he is, Chris Eyre, the Chief Constable of Nottinghamshire Police. It was his officers that were, according to Melanie, bullying and harassing her, and it was certainly her police officers who were breaking into her house and terrifying her. So this is the situation in Britain, while we point a finger at countries overseas. And remember the position of the Association of Chief Police Officers. It's now become the Police Chiefs Council, but this is the private body which is literally transforming the way the police do business. And in this screenshot here, we can see the type of police officer that is being produced. Now, people always say to us, is there any good news to balance the bad news that UK Column pushes out? Well, I'm pleased to say there absolutely is. And we have a good news story today, which is that Mr. Tom Crawford this morning had the case dismissed. Now, this means that Tom Crawford has won his case against repossession of his house. This is as a result of not only hard work in the courts by Tom Crawford and Guy Taylor and many others, but of course let's remember that it was many members of the public that went on the streets to support him. Now, we've got a short film clip here taken this morning where you should be able to hear Mr. Crawford telling his own story of what exactly happened in court.
What do you call it? Sit down and then we'll explain. We'll explain it. Now, where's Guy gone?
Yeah, they're going to explain it now, lads.
Right.
Let me record then.
Okay. So what's actually happened, when you're all ready, right, what's actually happened, the judge has passed his decision, which on the face of it looks absolutely terrible. I'm going to find it. It says, the order I make, the order what do you call it? Sit down and then we'll explain. We'll explain it. Now, where's Guy gone?
Yeah, they're going to explain it now, lads.
Right.
Let me record then.
Okay. So what's actually happened, when you're all ready, right, what's actually happened, the judge has passed his decision, which on the face of it looks absolutely terrible. I'm going to find it. It says, the order I make, the order.
Okay, unfortunately, we seem to have some technical problems there. I'm just going to say amazing. That video was checked before we started playing. It often appears to us that if we have some particularly good and sensitive information, that the gremlins appear. But we'll see if we can perhaps get that run immediately after the after today's UK Column news. Let's just remember what actually took place. So several attempts by the bailiffs in Nottingham to take Tom Crawford's family house, and it was only the presence of hundreds of people from the general public that stopped that happening. And Tom was very good in thanking people. What took place in court this morning was essentially very interesting because the bank was did not appear in person. They tried, after the case was effectively struck out, to go for an appeal. The case was dismissed, I'm sorry. They tried to go for an appeal, and the judge even turned that down, saying, well, you simply have not got a case. One of the key things that was raised in court was the fact that there was questioning by the judge as to where the sums of money had come from, which the bank claimed Tom Crawford still owned. And I understand that one of the answers from the bank's legal team was the numbers had come out of a computer. And this was also picked up by the judge, who said, well, computers are there to serve us. They're not there to dictate to us. So I'm sorry we haven't been able to show that clip. We will, as I say, have a go at getting that out as soon as possible. But basically, good news there. And does this now set a precedence where people are being unlawfully dispossessed of their property by the banking institutions? Well, we will see. Well, what can we do all about this? Well, get people on the streets, that's part of it. Get people together to inform them. And another reminder that this weekend is AV6, being run by Ian Crane. Many good speakers. If you still haven't got a ticket, we do have three free tickets available. If you like to contact Ian Crane direct and say you think you deserve those tickets, those are tickets to entrance to the event. They are not, they do not cover accommodation for the event, but if you think that you should be entitled to one or perhaps all three of those tickets, do get in touch with Ian Crane. Let's have a look at what's going to come up at the conference.
So I've been watching and 9/11 was just an incredible mind control event. You know, it was apparent to me then, as it is today, that people are literally mind controlled, that they're not actually thinking for themselves. Most of us are simply regurgitating.
We live in a bubble, and a lot of times, until you remove yourself from that bubble, you don't even know you're living in a bubble, in a kind of an information prison in the West.
But these guys have got a lot of money, and we complain about McDonald's and all that sort of thing. Do you know why they've got so much money? Because we fucking buy their shit. So it's time to stop it. You know, people say to me, where do we go? What's the first step? Stop supporting the companies that don't give a shit.
Be who you are. Don't police your thoughts, and don't police your expression. Express yourself, you know, but work for something positive. Express yourself in a positive way, you know. Create a better world because you're in it. Now, what is your legacy that you leave behind? Is the world better because you were here, or is it worse because you were here, or did you just not participate? You know, because you have to participate, you really do.
Okay, well, there you have it. Don't forget those three tickets going, but you need to get in touch with Ian Crane as soon as possible. And what you really need to say is why you think you should get one of those tickets. Now, something I forgot to say while we were looking at Tom Crawford and the success with that court case is we would like to give a special thank you to Russia Today because, of course, it was Russia Today that put in journalists on the ground very early in the morning to spend all day talking to the people and talking to Tom Crawford about what was actually happening, why he was protesting, what was taking place in the court. And of course, the RT journalists also went around to speak to members of the public to find out why they were there. So it took Russia Today to pick up on that extremely important story. And following their broadcasts later in the day, the BBC finally climbed into action and put a small piece out themselves. But what a remarkable situation that we're now seeing such a blatant clampdown, such blatant propaganda in Britain's mainstream media, that it's taking not only alternative media channels such as UK Column, but we're now seeing overseas media channels having to take the lead to get out the truth of what's happening. And having mentioned Russia Today, we understand that they're also picking up on the fact that many people are now questioning Boris Johnson's position in David Cameron's new cabinet. They are questioning how this man can be not only an MP but a cabinet minister and mayor for London. And of course, many people extremely concerned about the increasing power this man holds. Well, in this next few minutes, we're just going to have a look at what this is really about. And certainly something we don't believe is that Boris Johnson is any form of buffoon. This is a very calculating individual, and he is being used as a key component of the new age of David Cameron's government. So let's just remind ourselves what's been happening with Boris Johnson. And the Scotsman here is quoting David Cameron, who says Boris Johnson will be attending my political cabinet. As promised, he will devote his attention to his final year as Mayor of London. So come in as an MP, get paid as an MP, but actually what you're going to do, according to Cameron, is just be Mayor of London. But of course, he has brought him into the cabinet. And this is where we say, is this man a buffoon? Absolutely not. We say that this is one of the most dangerous politicians in Britain. So what's he involved in? Well, he's got an unspecified role in the cabinet as a cabinet member. What will he actually be doing? Twiddling his thumbs? We don't think so. This is a man who's going to be sitting in the background like Francis Maude, for example, or indeed as Nick Clegg was, and he is going to be pulling very powerful political strings. But let's remember, Mayor of London, in charge of housing, in charge of transport, in charge of the Met Police, but also trying to control courts. Here's the Mail report, which says that Boris Johnson demands control of London courts and prosecutors in a power battle with Whitehall. So this man making a fiefdom of London, more and more power concentrated into the hands of what many would regard as a very dangerous political individual. Well, it gets worse, because let's have a look at this headline. A Boris in every city. Osborne wants powerful mayors to take charge of health, housing and transport across England. And he's promising England's major cities sweeping new powers. And he's going to announce that Manchester will be the first to benefit. That's an interesting word. He says the model of trying to run everything from London is broken. Now, this headline, extremely important. Just keep that on screen, if you will, please, Nick. This is extremely important headline because of the amount of information in it. So George Osborne saying he's going to try and get a Boris-type mayor into every city, and he's going to give them sweeping new powers. So we're going to see increasingly the police integrated with city authorities, local authorities. We have integration of the control of the city with the police. Manchester is going to be the unfortunate first city to benefit from this. But look at that last statement. He will say the model of trying to run everything from London is broken. And of course, we know under European Union plans, London is simply to become a city region. It is no longer to be the capital of Britain. And already we've seen talk of Parliament being moved out of its so-called decrepit Westminster buildings into other locations. Manchester's been mentioned, and at one stage Birmingham was. So this was some of the detail of this article. A city's devolution bill will be a centrepiece of the first all-Conservative Queen's speech for 19 years. The proposal, dubbed Devo Mank in Manchester, is particularly designed to give northern cities much more power over their own affairs, allowing them to compete more effectively with the capital. Now let's remind ourselves, or highlight here, the proposal which is dubbed Devo Mank. Because if you take the article at face value, this is government policy that's being talked about. But of course it is not. This has come from a totally different source. We would like to show you the source, because this political agenda has come out of this think tank, Res Publica, which says it's about society, prosperity and virtue. Let's have a look at the lead man. Here he is, Philip Blond. And if I highlight it here, here's the Devo Mank document, which this man boasts that he has been able to put in and influence government policy. His ideas have influenced the agenda around the big society and civil renewal and have helped to redefine British and international politics. So these are all the papers. We, of course, phoned up Respublica this morning to say, could you just tell us who funds you? A very nice young lady immediately said to me, why do you want to know? And I said, well, if you're claiming to be an independent think tank influencing government policy, then probably we actually need to know who is funding you. Well, they didn't want to answer on the phone. They said they would call me back, but true to form, we haven't had a call. So we did a little more work on their website. Here they are about us. We are an independent, non-partisan think tank based in Westminster that seeks to establish a new economic, social and cultural settlement for the United Kingdom. Our interventions in public policy and public debate have been decisive, and our ideas have been adopted by politicians of all parties. So all well and good. Well, who are they? Let's have a look at the people. Brightest and best. Their people are extraordinary, outstanding. Have a look at some of the trustees. We've got a Professor John Milbank, Professor of Religion, Politics, Ethics, Director of the Centre of Theology and Philosophy at the University of Nottingham. So clearly that's a practical person. He's run businesses. He knows what the world's about. I'm going to say very gently, a teacher. We've got a David Hawkins, spent 15 years in government relations. Oh, he's also been involved in Number 10, and he started his career at a leading lobbying company, Westminster Strategy. And we've got Adrian Pabst, a lecturer in politics at the University of Kent. So there we are. These are the experts. But as we've seen quite clearly, it is their work that's driving the Conservatives' policy. This is nothing to do with coming out of the brains of Conservative politicians. I think that may be an oxymoron. Well, getting a bit deeper, here are the team themselves, and Philip Blond's article is the one that's been appearing in the press, so he's the big man. Internationally recognised political thinker, social and economic commentator. He bridges the gaps between politics and practice, strategic consultation, policy formation. Who is this man? We've no real idea. These are a couple of his kingpins. Michela Costello, head of Prosperity Programme. And, well, we're not sure what her background is, financial, and she's taking things forward. Mark Morin, he's the localism lead, and he's got a remarkably thin CV, which doesn't seem to tell you what he's done in the past at all. And we'll bring in Caroline here, Caroline Julian, head of policy programmes. And, well, OK, what has she done? We leave it to you to have a look at that. This is the key thing. These people are accountable to no one. And when we asked who funded them, they simply didn't want to say. So we're going to say these are very, very interesting people. Out of nowhere, they have the ability to frame conservative policy, conservative political policy, and that policy is clearly targeted at the breakup of the existing constitution in UK. Let's have a look at this one. Here's the Telegraph. It's time to unleash the power of the North, a strategy of devolution for the whole of the North, not just the favoured cities, would bring the home of the Industrial Revolution back to life. So what did this man say in bullet points? Well, it's this. We're going to have a there's a grand coalition between Labour politicians and a Conservative Chancellor. So this is very interesting. We're told that the political system is now fragmented. This document is saying something rather different is going on. And here's the Devo Manc. And this has led to George Osborne's adoption of those recommendations for full devolution of public services to Greater Manchester, including the NHS. Devolving public services allows not just a reinvention of the state, but also allows local authorities to stimulate their local economies. And the final bit, it's saying, so if the government can live up to its stated ambitions and rebalance the country, and if the Conservative Chancellor can drive forward city-based devolution. So this is now the Tories' real policy coming to the fore. They are going to completely smash Britain's established constitution and our systems of government. This is going back to city regions of medieval times. And as we see the corruption increase in our city states at the moment, more and more power is to be placed into the hands of fewer and fewer people, as in Boris Johnson and his power base in London. Well, who's going to help this? Well, what better place to turn to than SNP? And the Mail at least bringing out that Sturgeon is already stepping forward to say what we really need is a second independence referendum in Scotland. So I think this is known as the Ireland lie. Of course, the Irish didn't get it right in the first vote, so they had to have a second EU vote, and it appears that Ms Sturgeon thinks exactly the same thing should happen. And we are hearing that there is great unhappiness amongst the top of Britain's military because, of course, what Sturgeon is doing as she brings this debate forward is sort of says, well, if you don't give us a second go at independence, you might have to lose the Trident bases anywhere. So we are hearing that there's a little bit of political blackmail going on over this subject. And of course, in the background, we have the European Union powering in because they are desperate to see the remains of Britain's military crushed so that what is left, effectively a home defence force, is going to be brought straight into the European army network. So this is more extremely dark and devious dealings by David Cameron, and of course now being helped by Ms Sturgeon. Well, if you're going to deal in politics, you're also going to need some help from big business. And what better man to help you than boss of the Bank of England, Mark Carnage, as Mike Robinson likes to call him. And he's been stirring the pot in a very big way by saying that the threat of Britain leaving the EU is fueling business uncertainty. What he's really saying is that, in his opinion, Britain has got to stay with the European Union because Mr Carnage has cooked up some figures where he's trying to say that, of course, the bulk of our commerce is done with Europe, the great lie. Well, we just like to point out that this man is an unelected Canadian boss of the Bank of England, and yet somebody has handed him the power to absolutely influence our political process and to support the European Union. And remind ourselves that the European Union has still not produced a full and audited set of accounts for over 18 years. So a fraudulent organisation supported by the Bank of England and, of course, David Cameron's Conservatives. And it's Cameron who would like to tell us to stop banker bashing. Well, we think as long as it's done in a friendly, cuddly way, not only should we be bashing the bankers, but we need to be demanding that they appear in court on fraud and corruption charges. So perhaps the Crawford case is going to start to open up that route because it has now been proven in court that at least one bank has been involved in what can only be described as corrupt and fraudulent practice, including perverting the course of justice by telling porky pies. Where is this going to take us? Well, we did say a few days ago, the UK column has been warning for years the agenda of the LibLabCon was to break up the UK. Let's remind ourselves of this bit where we showed the forked tongue of David Cameron. He gets in, he talks about one nation, one United Kingdom, but he's going to unite us by breaking us apart under devolution. One United Kingdom, we're going to use devolution, and what is the aim is to reshape the future of the United Kingdom itself. Well, Cameron's in the driving seat at the moment, but of course let's remind ourselves that it was This man, Tony Blair, many regard him as a war criminal. Many people would like to see this man brought to justice. But look at what he was doing back in the year 2000 and what he was saying. Mr. Blair has a vision of a new Britain. Central to this vision is the creation of a new class, a new elite, placed in positions of authority, who will propagate the new spirit of the age and spread the principles of the third way across Britain. Think about those words and think about what David Cameron is now doing by putting Boris Johnson into a position of immense power in London and similar people into similar positions of power in other cities across UK. Well, where does it lead? We think it ultimately leads to this. Daily Mail again, apologies for that, well, what an upsetting article. It's been revealed that North Korea has been executing people. And this has been done on some fairly flimsy charges. Falling asleep in meetings is one of them. And on one occasion, they used an anti-aircraft gun to dispatch one of the unfortunate people. Well, just remind ourselves that, of course, if the North Korean president was establishing his power base by deleting information and details about his regime from the internet, David Cameron did exactly the same thing by making sure that in the lead up to the election period, really, he was removing information about previous Tory promises and data from the Conservative Party website. So pot and kettle, we've got a vicious dictator in North Korea. We've got what we believe is a very dangerous dictator installing himself in UK. Techniques are the same. We've just presumably got a couple more years to go before the executions start in Britain. And we just remind ourselves of the words from Mr. Cameron. For too long, we've been a passively tolerant society, saying to our citizens, as long as you obey the law, we will leave you alone. Well, I'm going to end on a positive statement, and that is to say how interesting, Mr. Cameron, that when we end up with hundreds of people on the streets peacefully supporting their neighbours, as in the case of Tom Crawford, all of a sudden we see your regime start to back away. So if you're sitting at home wondering what we can do to stop events in the UK, the answer is we need people to get off those comfortable seats, to be in contact with friends, neighbours and the public, and you need to be helping your fellow human being. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. Apologies about the video. We look forward to seeing you at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.